Dr. Counsel Miller, an orthopedic surgeon, questions the validity of these immediate cures.
I think at a meeting of faith healing where a person gets up, actually walks, who supposedly had not walked prior to the faith healer touching the person, is a case of questionable pathology. I'm not quite certain that that person had any anatomical or physiological deficit to begin with. Perhaps that person was, quote, psyched into thinking he couldn't walk. And then, on the suggestion of the faith healer, that person actually showed that he could indeed walk. I wouldn't call that a cure necessarily for any medical disease process that that patient had. I think it may have been a suggested physical defect more so than a physiological or anatomical defect.
Do it again! All right, do it again! All right, tell me. Hallelujah!
Medical science and what people call healing by faith or faith healing, these which were worlds apart many years ago are coming closer and closer and closer together. There is a great appreciation in the heart of all true doctors for what can happen in the life of an individual through the power of faith in God.
Give the Lord a clap offering, come on!
No single disease raises as many fears as cancer. Its victims reach beyond conventional medicine toward any scrap of hope. They are vulnerable to such remedies as Laetrile and faith healing. Can these help? Dr. Michael Vanscoy Mosier is a specialist in the treatment of cancer.
Why patients leave establishment medicine, such as we are, and go to, let's say, non-conventional kinds of therapy, I think is very individual. Some patients go because of a long feeling of distrust of the medical establishment. Some go because they recognize that conventional therapies have nothing to offer, and rather than accept no chance or no hope, really, they go where there is some kind of hope at least. One does get to the point of realizing that specific therapy can no longer reverse the patient's medical condition when we realize that there's no realistic expectation for reversing the course of their illness. The will to get better and a positive attitude are very important parts of the therapy of cancer. I can provide certain things to a patient in terms of treatment that I believe is useful, but the patient has to provide something else, which is a real strong, positive approach to things and a need and a will to get better. Science is always looking for miracles. It's just a matter of what you call a miracle. But as a physician, I don't go looking for miracles. I've come to see very little magic, really, in the treatment of cancer, and I focus on what's realistically possible.
For some, like Reverend Joseph Lee and his congregation, miracle cures are real. In rousing, moving ceremonies, Reverend Lee claims hundreds of cures. What is this impelling force that encourages the body to heal? Is it possible for science to discover its source? In Search Of will explore this possibility next. Doctors can only guess to what extent the brain controls the body. They do know it is our greatest untapped resource. This is the major premise behind the newly emerging field of medicine known as holistic. Are all forms of unconventional healing merely a question of mind over matter, or is there another force at work, an objective force that can be measured? Dr. Bernard Grad of the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal attempts to isolate this objective healing factor.
I believe that these were the first studies done on plants and animals that showed that the so-called psychic healing was in fact a real and objective process and not due to any so-called placebo effect or suggestion of any kind. I want to emphasize one point, that all of these studies that we had done were done by conventional techniques. If I had studied a drug or a vitamin, I would have used similar techniques. So the only thing that was unconventional about it was the question I asked, that is, can laying on of the hands actually accelerate a healing process?
Dr. Grad devised an experiment which requires uniformly wounding the backs of 3 sets of mice. The experimental mice will be held between the hands of a faith healer twice daily for 2 weeks. The other 2 are control groups. Except for the healing treatments, all maintenance procedures are identical for the 3 groups. Two controls are necessary in order to prove that heat alone is not the healing energy Dr. Grad is seeking.